Jack Lennox had never considered himself much of an adventurer. He wasn't the type to suddenly find himself face to face with life-altering encounters. He was a man of quiet routines. Coffee at 6 a.m., a quick glance at the headlines that were always more depressing than the day before, and an entire evening devoted to disassembling old radios or tending to his garden. His backyard shed, though a bit of a mess, was his sanctuary from the world. He called it his corner of peace, a place to repair broken machines, tune out the noise of life, and get lost in the hum of his thoughts. But that evening, the peace of his small suburban home was shattered by something far less mundane than the hum of a malfunctioning toaster. It all began when Jack went outside to retrieve his gardening gloves. He had been meaning to fix the gate for days, and it seemed like a good time to finally check on it. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the sky was painted with streaks of orange and purple. The cool evening air was crisp, with just a hint of an incoming rainstorm. His feet crunched on the gravel path leading to the shed, but just as he reached for the handle of the door, he heard something. A faint, almost imperceptible sound. It was like the rustle of leaves, but there were no trees nearby, and it was too rhythmic to be wind. Curious, Jack pushed the door open, the rusted hinges creaking in protest, and that's when he saw her. The girl was curled up in the corner of his shed, her back pressed against a stack of old crates. At first glance, she could have been mistaken for an unusually pale, disheveled teenager. Her silvery hair shimmered faintly under the dim light filtering in through the cracks in the shed's walls, and her skin glowed, almost unnaturally, like it had absorbed all the moonlight in the sky. She wore a tattered, oversized sweater that looked like it had been stolen from some lost wardrobe in the 80s. Jack blinked, thinking perhaps he had hit his head a little too hard on the doorframe. Hello? He called, his voice cracking slightly. The girl's eyes flickered open, revealing pupils too large to be entirely human, and they gleamed with a sort of liquid light, like there was something electric swirling behind them. She stared at him for a long moment, expression unreadable, and then in a voice that sounded like it came from somewhere distant, she spoke. "I'm sorry, I did not mean to intrude," she said, her words strangely measured, but laced with an accent Jack couldn't place. "I needed a place to hide." Jack's brain had already begun to formulate a series of wild scenarios, none of which were remotely plausible. Maybe she was a runaway, lost in the world and hiding from something. He had no idea, but a little voice in his head screamed that this was something stranger. "Hide from what?" he asked, trying to sound calm, though his heart was racing. He took a cautious step forward, squinting in the poor light. "And, what exactly are you doing here? This is my shed. I don't think I've seen you around." The girl shifted, pulling her knees closer to her chest, her silver hair falling around her face like a curtain. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause trouble. My name is Kayla. I was just—" She hesitated, clearly struggling with the words. "I was just looking for a place to stay. I didn't think anyone would find me here." Jack raised an eyebrow, his skepticism clearly mounting. "Kayla, as in Kayla. That's your name?" He glanced around the cluttered shed. "You picked my shed to hide in?" Kayla nodded solemnly, clearly unaware of how absurd the situation sounded to an outsider. "I needed somewhere that was discreet." "Well, discreet doesn't exactly cover it," Jack muttered, his sense of normalcy rapidly falling apart. He scratched his head. "Look, I'm just a guy trying to make sure my lawnmower's still in one piece, and now I've got a girl in my shed who's glowing." Kayla blinked. "I do not glow. You must be mistaken." Jack stepped forward, unable to resist the urge to point out the obvious. "You're not mistaken about the glowing thing. Unless I'm starting to see things, and trust me, I don't even do yoga." The girl's expression faltered, like she hadn't expected humor, or sarcasm really. She had a peculiar way of processing the world, as though she was absorbing everything at once and filtering out the parts that didn't fit. "I apologize," she said. "I did not mean to alarm you. It's just, where I come from, this is how we blend in." She hesitated again, as though trying to figure out the right phrase. It is not intentional. I cannot control it. Jack found himself caught somewhere between disbelief and genuine amusement. Yeah, no kidding. You don't exactly blend in like a normal human being. If you were trying to blend in, you could have at least, worn something a little less obvious? The girl glanced down at her oversized sweater and then back at Jack, her expression unreadable. I had limited options. Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. He was beginning to think this was some weird prank. Maybe it was a student film project or some wild, new-age viral marketing campaign, but something about the girl's eyes, the sheer earnestness, combined with an underlying confusion, convinced him she wasn't acting. She wasn't pretending to be something she wasn't. Okay, Jack said slowly, setting the lawnmower down with a thud. How about you start by telling me who you really are and what's going on here? Because this isn't how I imagined my Thursday night going. Kayla nodded, almost mechanically, her glowing eyes shifting toward the shed's dimly lit corner. I am from a place far away. I am not from this planet. I have been chased. I do not know how long I can stay here. Jack stared at her, utterly flabbergasted. His mind immediately raced to 100 sci-fi movies he'd seen, but this didn't seem like the plot of any of them. There was no grand evil force, no impending invasion, at least not yet. You're telling me, Jack said slowly, as though he were speaking to a particularly literal child, that you're an alien? Kayla didn't flinch. Yes, I am an alien. Well, Jack said, finally cracking a smile. If you wanted to be discreet, you really should have started with a better cover story. I mean, I know we have a shortage of good Netflix shows, but this is a little extreme. Kayla blinked, clearly missing the point. I do not understand the reference, but I will take your word for it. Jack sighed, leaning against the wall of his shed and trying to process the surreal nature of the situation. You're not from around here, huh? And yet you've picked the most inconspicuous place to hide. I have no other choice, she said quietly. The people who are looking for me— She paused, looking troubled. They will stop at nothing to find me. Jack didn't know if it was the glow in her eyes or the chilling gravity of her voice, but for the first time he felt the edge of something real in her words. Well then, he said, clapping his hands together with exaggerated enthusiasm. Guess we'd better figure this out, huh? Because just between you and me, I don't think the shed's going to cut it for long. Kayla's gaze softened, and for the briefest moment, the glowing in her eyes dimmed. Jack's offhand remark, despite its clumsiness, seemed to have made her feel a little less alone. I believe you are right, she replied. Jack grinned and reached into his pocket. Great. First, though, how about I make us some coffee? You'll need the energy for whatever's coming next. The following morning, Jack found himself staring at his kitchen counter, surrounded by the oddest collection of mismatched kitchenware, a chipped coffee mug, a toaster that looked like it had survived the Great Depression, and a jar of peanut butter that had seen better days. The coffee was brewing in a jarring, age-old drip machine that sounded like a dying machine trying to produce a cup of optimism. Kayla was perched on one of his kitchen chairs, watching him intently. Her hands, pale and delicate, were wrapped around an empty teacup, probably because she wasn't sure what it was for. Jack had a fleeting thought that he should teach her how to handle simple human objects, like mugs, but then again, with her glowing skin and the way her eyes shifted with an unnatural shimmer, he wasn't sure she needed a mug at all. Maybe she could just absorb liquid directly through osmosis. That would be convenient. Kayla, I have to ask, Jack said, trying to break the silence while the coffee percolated. What exactly do you eat? Aside from whatever you've been picking up in my backyard? He gave her a wry smile, attempting to keep the conversation light despite the bizarre circumstances. Kayla looked down at her hands, her glowing eyes flickering. I do not require much sustenance. My species absorbs energy directly from the atmosphere. Jack raised an eyebrow. Absorbs energy from the atmosphere? So you're saying you don't need food? Not even a nice greasy slice of pizza? Kayla blinked. I do not know what a pizza is. Jack stared at her for a long moment, as if waiting for the punchline to a bad joke. When none came, he sighed and pulled a chair out, sitting down across from her. Well, that's one way to live. If I could just absorb energy from the air, I'd probably spend my days hanging out by the barbecue, soaking in the fumes of burnt burgers. But you know, no judgment. Your air has a strange taste, Kayla said with a hint of distaste. I have never encountered anything quite like it before. Jack let out a snort of laughter, leaning back in his chair. Yeah, you get used to it. We humans call it pollution. Really gives you that fresh industrial flavor. He glanced at the coffee pot and sighed. Well, if you're not into consuming food, I guess I'll keep the coffee to myself. I wasn't really planning on sharing anyway. Kayla's eyes flickered, a ripple of unease crossing her face. You are kind, but I do not wish to trouble you. I do not belong here. Jack waved a hand dismissively, trying to lighten the mood. Hey, no one belongs here. The house is falling apart, the lawn's a mess, and my shed's got a live alien in it. It's not exactly American dream material. You fit right in. Kayla's confusion deepened. American dream? What is that? Jack grinned. It's a thing. You'll get the hang of it. Basically, we all pretend to have our lives together, while secretly, we're all just trying to find a way to survive on burnt toast and caffeine. A sudden thought struck him. So, tell me, Kayla, what exactly are you running from? Besides, you know, my toaster? Kayla's face grew serious, her glowing eyes dimming slightly. It is not my toaster, she said softly. It is my people. They are not kind. I came here to escape them, to protect myself, to... She faltered, her voice tinged with a deep, unspoken fear. Jack sat up straighter, the tone in her voice sobering him immediately. Your people, like your planet? Yes, Kayla nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. My people control vast stretches of the universe. We are known for our advanced technology, but we do not use it kindly. My people do not care for others. I was part of their program. I was supposed to help them, but I couldn't. Jack leaned in, more focused than he'd been all morning. What kind of program? Kayla shook her head, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup absent-mindedly. I was meant to help harvest energy from planets, to take what we need and leave nothing behind. Earth was one of those planets, but I couldn't be a part of it. Harvest energy? Jack repeated, frowning. Like you drain planets or something? That sounds pretty bad. It is bad, she whispered. But I didn't know any other way. And now they are looking for me. I ran. I had to run. Jack rubbed his chin, trying to process this new information. So let me get this straight. You're an alien who can absorb energy, and your people want to harvest Earth, and you're not down with that? Kayla nodded, her eyes flashing with a mix of regret and determination. I am not like them. I do not wish to harm this world, but I fear they will not understand. They will come for me. I will not be able to protect you from them. Well, I wouldn't say I'm protected just yet, Jack muttered, glancing at his cluttered kitchen. But don't worry about me. I've seen every disaster movie ever made, and I'm pretty sure I'm prepared for aliens. Kayla blinked at him, completely confused. Disaster movie? Oh, right. You're not from around here. Jack sighed. Okay, imagine this. You're the alien who wants to harvest Earth, and some plucky underdog guy fights back with a lot of explosions, bad one-liners, and a scene where he gets a kiss from the love interest before everything blows up. That sounds inefficient, Kayla said, her eyes wide. Well, yeah. It's more about the spectacle than actual strategy. Jack stood and started rummaging through the cabinets. Anyway, here's the deal. I'm no hero, and I'm definitely no alien savior. but I don't like the idea of some intergalactic thugs coming to wreck my garden, so I'm going to help you." Kayla's expression softened, and for the first time she smiled, though it was small and more hesitant than anything else. "You would help me, even though you do not know me?" Jack shrugged, pulling out a packet of cereal from the back of a shelf. "I don't know. You've got a weird sense of humor and some serious energy absorption powers. You're like an upgraded version of a toaster. I can respect that." Kayla blinked at him again, her confusion evident. "You respect a toaster? Let's just say you've got the whole I can absorb energy thing down better than my old one ever did." Jack grabbed a couple of bowls and poured the cereal into them, tossing one toward Kayla. "Here, I'm not sure how you eat, but this is the best I've got." Kayla stared at the cereal, then at Jack. "This is food?" "Yep," Jack replied, taking a spoonful. "It's processed grains with a sugar coating. Very high in energy, though not very nutritious." She looked at the spoon as though it might sprout wings and take off on its own. Jack grinned. "Don't worry, it's harmless. You'll get the hang of it." For a moment, there was silence, only the clink of metal on porcelain filling the air. Kayla picked up the spoon tentatively and took a small bite, her expression turning to one of quiet surprise. "It is sweet," she said, her voice tinged with wonder. "Yeah, we humans like sweet things," Jack replied, his tone light. "We also like pretending that sugary cereal is part of a balanced diet." Kayla didn't answer, her focus still on the cereal. Jack couldn't help but smile. They were two very different creatures, and yet, for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. Jack had a theory. If he acted like things were normal, they might just stay that way. In the space of 48 hours, he had gone from his typical suburban existence of lawn maintenance and endless YouTube rabbit holes to harboring an alien fugitive who could absorb energy from the air and probably make his microwave explode with a look. He figured that if he kept the day's pace slow enough, he could hold the fragile piece together and maybe even get a handle on this situation. The trick, as he saw it, was to play it cool. So, after Kayla's rather curious debut into the world of breakfast cereals, Jack went about his day as if there wasn't a glowing extraterrestrial being sitting at his kitchen table. He made some calls for work, read through his usual batch of mildly depressing emails, and even took a quick trip to the hardware store to pick up a few supplies for fixing the gate. He made sure to leave the house as normal as possible, leaving Kayla to her own devices. When he returned, however, things were anything but normal. As soon as Jack stepped through the door, the unmistakable scent of burnt toast hit him in the face and he froze. Not the good kind of burnt toast, like the type you'd get if you were trying to make it extra crispy. This smelled like an electrical fire mixed with something he couldn't quite place. "Kayla," Jack called, cautiously setting down his bag. "Please tell me you didn't burn the place down." A soft voice echoed from the kitchen. "I was experimenting." Jack's stomach sank as he approached the source of the smell. He rounded the corner to find Kayla standing by the counter, her hands hovering over an ancient toaster like she was trying to wrestle some kind of cosmic power from it. The toaster was plugged into the wall, and from the looks of it, something was definitely wrong. Black smoke was pouring from the toaster's slats, and a few sparks popped out like fireworks on the 4th of July. "I was trying to replicate your energy absorption technique," Kayla explained, looking uncomfortably proud. "But I believe I miscalculated the energy output." Jack's lips curled into a grin despite himself. "Yeah, no kidding. That toaster's not supposed to have that much energy. If you wanted to make some toast, you could have just asked. No need to create a small-scale meltdown." Kayla turned to face him, her expression innocent, but slightly confused. "I thought it would help. My species absorbs energy differently. I thought, this toaster could be a conduit." Jack chuckled, scratching the back of his head. "Well, it's definitely a conduit for disaster, that's for sure. What were you planning to do? Absorb all the energy in the house and start powering the TV with it?" I'm not sure how your television works, Kayla said, her tone almost apologetic. But I assumed there were reserves of energy I could tap into. It's not entirely dissimilar to your power grid. Yeah, kind of, but those power grids don't blow up when you look at them funny, Jack quipped. Maybe stick to, I don't know, not trying to absorb my kitchen appliances, or at least ask before you fry anything else. Kayla nodded, her glowing eyes dimming in what seemed like embarrassment. I understand. I will attempt to control it. You do that? Jack said dryly, crossing his arms. Though I'm not sure if controlling a toaster is a skill you should brag about. Just then, a loud knock at the front door sent a jolt of adrenaline through Jack's system. It wasn't the kind of knock that you'd expect from a neighbor either. It was forceful, sharp, almost like someone was testing the wood of the doorframe with purpose. Jack's heart skipped a beat, and his mind raced back to Kayla's words about her people. They will come for me. I will not be able to protect you. Stay here, Jack hissed, motioning toward the hallway. He wasn't sure who was at the door, but he had a sinking feeling it wasn't the UPS guy with a package. Kayla's eyes locked onto him, a deep, alien intensity flashing behind them. They are here. They have found me. Before Jack could respond, Kayla moved swiftly, almost too quickly for him to track. In a blink, she was by the door, her posture tense, her eyes narrowing. She turned to Jack, her voice low but urgent. You should not face them. They will harm you. Yeah, well, Jack muttered, trying to force his heart back into his chest. I'm not exactly a fan of people barging into my house, no matter who or what they are. I mean it, Kayla said, taking a small step toward the door. They will not hesitate. Jack's gaze flicked nervously between Kayla and the door. He could hear muffled voices on the other side, voices that weren't quite human. There was a mechanical undertone to the sound, like metal scraping against metal, and an odd clicking noise that set Jack's teeth on edge. Something wasn't right. With a deep breath, Jack pulled open the nearest drawer and grabbed the first thing he could find, an old butter knife. It wasn't exactly the weapon of choice for defending against an alien invasion, but it was something. He was about to open the door when Kayla placed a hand on his arm, her voice soft but insistent. Please, let me handle this. Before Jack could protest, the door swung open with a sudden creak. A figure stood in the doorway, tall and imposing. At first glance, it looked almost human, tall, athletic, wearing a sleek silver bodysuit that shimmered in the dim light. But the second thing Jack noticed was the eerie, almost insect-like eyes, black and deep, with no discernible pupils. The figure didn't speak right away. Instead, it scanned the room, its head cocking slightly, as if assessing the situation. When its gaze landed on Kayla, there was a flicker of recognition. You, the figure rasped, its voice metallic and flat, like someone speaking through a broken intercom. You have betrayed us. Jack felt his pulse quicken. Kayla, who is this? Kayla's jaw tightened, and she stepped in front of Jack, her body radiating an unspoken energy. It is one of them, a scout. They have come to bring me back. The figure took a step forward, its mechanical movements precise but unnatural. Jack's grip tightened on the butter knife, but Kayla raised a hand to stop him. This is not your fight, she said, her voice steady, though there was a tremor beneath it. I will deal with this. The figure didn't move. Instead, it seemed to study Kayla for a long moment, its head tilting as if in confusion. You cannot escape what you are, Kayla. Your destiny is sealed. Jack's head spun. What's your destiny, Kayla? What's going on here? Kayla met Jack's gaze, her expression full of sorrow. They want me to help them destroy worlds, to harvest them for energy, for power. I cannot. I will not. The scout's eyes narrowed. You think you can defy us? You think you can stop the inevitable? Kayla didn't respond. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate step forward, her body pulsing with an energy that made the air around her vibrate. It was subtle but unmistakable, a power that didn't belong on Earth. Jack swallowed hard, realizing just how serious this was. He didn't know who this scout was, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let Kayla face this alone. He gripped the butter knife tighter. "Not today," Jack muttered under his breath, as his heart raced in anticipation of what would come next. The scout was still standing in the doorway, its cold, insectile eyes locked onto Kayla, as if it were calculating the exact moment to strike. The air hummed with a strange energy that Jack could feel down to the tips of his fingers, the atmosphere thick with the weight of unspoken threats. The tension was enough to make the floor creak underfoot, like it was trying to escape the pressure. Jack, still holding his butter knife, glanced at Kayla, who was standing perfectly still in front of him, her gaze fixed on the scout. He didn't know what kind of alien drama was unfolding here, but he was starting to feel like he was standing in the middle of some cosmic soap opera. Except, instead of dramatic music and swirling camera angles, there was just the awkward silence of a dude in his kitchen, holding an oversized utensil. "So," Jack said, trying to break the tension in the most unheroic way possible, "I'm guessing you guys don't do hugs, huh?" The scout didn't even flinch. In fact, it didn't even acknowledge Jack's existence, focusing entirely on Kayla. "You are a traitor, Kayla. You were chosen. You were to help us. You are not meant to live among these primitives." Jack blinked. "Primitives?" He gave an exaggerated glance at his crumbling kitchen. "Buddy, look at this place. I'm pretty sure I'm the definition of primitive. We don't even know how to properly toast bread." Kayla's eyes glowed softly, a subtle warning to Jack to stay out of this. "They do not understand. They never will." The scout's voice was sharp, almost metallic, as if it was using an old speaker system that couldn't quite catch up with its emotions. "The primitives are irrelevant. You have defied your purpose, Kayla. You cannot hide from the truth. You will return with us. You will fulfill your role, or you will be eliminated." Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. Eliminated? Not wanting to risk Kayla getting into a full-blown fight with this alien, because, frankly, he didn't know if he was supposed to side with her or the creepy scout, Jack raised the butter knife in an exaggerated, very unconvincing manner. "Hey, if you think you're just going to waltz in here and start threatening people, I'm going to have to insist that you at least buy me dinner first." Kayla shot him a quick, confused look. "What?" "Dinner," Jack said, holding up the knife like he was about to carve a turkey. "You know, a meal. I don't just let strangers barge into my house and start yelling about eliminations without at least a nice glass of wine or, like, a fruit basket." The scout didn't respond to Jack's joke, but Kayla blinked slowly, as if processing the absurdity of his words. She shifted her stance, her energy still crackling in the air, but it was evident that she wasn't looking to escalate things to violence yet. For a moment, Jack wondered if she was hoping to negotiate with this alien rather than fight. The scout, meanwhile, stood unmoving, staring at Kayla with what could have been disdain. Or perhaps it was just alien indifference. It was hard to tell. "Your humor is misplaced," the scout finally rasped. "You are wasting your time, human. Kayla's betrayal has already been noted. There is nothing left to discuss." "Well, that's the thing," Jack said, lowering the butter knife. "I don't think you really know the whole story. You just kind of showed up, all doom and gloom, and frankly, I'm getting some serious bad guy vibes here." The scout shifted its gaze to Jack, finally acknowledging his presence. The movement was almost imperceptible, but Jack noticed it. The scout was sizing him up, as if wondering how much of a threat he might actually pose. "You are the one who shelters her." "Yeah, I've been slumming it here for years," Jack said nonchalantly, tapping the counter behind him. "Not much of a hero, but I'm really good at surviving a bad sitcom situation. So, what exactly is your deal? You come here, threaten her life, and then what? You take her back to whatever intergalactic council you're part of?" The scout tilted its head slightly, the black eyes glowing faintly. "You think you understand. You do not. You cannot. We do not negotiate." Jack let out a dramatic sigh. "Well, that's just great, because I've got about 5 minutes of patience, And if you don't start making sense, I'm going to start using this butter knife as a really bad metaphor for my personality." Kayla's glowing eyes flickered. It was hard to tell if she was amused by Jack's antics or genuinely worried that his sarcastic charm would get them both killed. The scout remained silent, its metallic voice unwavering. "There is no negotiation, human. There is only compliance." "Okay, you know what?" Jack said, his voice rising slightly. "This whole comply or die thing is getting old. I'm not asking for much, but if we're going to do this whole intergalactic, you can't escape your destiny dance, I'd really appreciate it if we could, I don't know, maybe work out some ground rules? Like, how do you expect to take her back? Exactly. Is there a flight plan or is this a walk-in sort of deal?" The scout narrowed its eyes at Jack, clearly losing patience. "You dare question our methods?" Jack leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "I'm asking for a friend. What's the procedure here? You come in, make all these threats, and then what? You drag her away? Mind explaining that part?" Kayla, who had been listening silently, looked at Jack in surprise. "You do not understand, do you? They cannot be reasoned with." "Well, that's a little obvious," Jack replied. "But listen, I'm not really trying to save the world here. I'm just trying to make sure I don't wake up tomorrow with an alien spaceship parked on my front lawn and a bunch of laser guns pointed at me." The scout tilted its head once again, as if contemplating Jack's words, or maybe just trying to figure out how to kill him with its eyes. "You are wasting your time," it said finally. "She will return with us, or we will take her. There is no choice." Jack stared at the scout for a moment, the humor slowly draining from his face as the gravity of the situation hit him. This wasn't some misunderstanding. They weren't here for a friendly chat. This was something much more dangerous. And Kayla wasn't just some runaway alien. She was caught in a conflict far beyond his comprehension. But Jack wasn't about to back down just yet. "So, if I say no, what happens then?" The scout gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Then we eliminate you." "Well, that's just rude," Jack muttered, letting the knife drop to the counter. "You know, if I was going to die today, I really thought it would involve a bit more suspense. Maybe some lasers, some explosions. You know, something a little more exciting." Kayla took a deep breath and stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "Please, I do not wish for anyone to be harmed because of me." The scout stared at her, silent for a long moment. Then, almost reluctantly, it stepped back and lowered its head. "If you wish to spare them," it said slowly, "you must come with us. No more running." Kayla met Jack's gaze, a mix of sadness and resolve in her eyes. "I cannot outrun my past forever." Jack gave her a reassuring smile. "Yeah, well, I'm kind of an expert at running from awkward situations. I'll figure something out." The scout didn't seem impressed by Jack's bravado, but it wasn't attacking either. It stood in the doorway waiting for Kayla's answer, like a cosmic clock counting down to some inevitable conclusion. "Well," Jack said, drawing a deep breath, "this got complicated." The scout stood at the door like an immovable statue, its black eyes fixed on Kayla, daring her to make a move. The air was thick with tension again, but this time there was a new undercurrent, something more urgent, more real. The situation wasn't just escalating, it was on the verge of tipping over into something neither Jack nor Kayla was ready for. Jack wiped his palms on his jeans. The butter knife he had so valiantly wielded was now safely abandoned on the kitchen counter, a silent testament to his failed attempt at looking heroic. He glanced at Kyla, who was still standing between him and the scout, her posture straight, her gaze unwavering. "So," Jack said, trying to cut through the suffocating silence, "this is it, huh? The big decision. The moment where everything gets really awkward." Kayla gave him a brief glance, the faintest flicker of a smile in her eyes, before returning her attention to the scout. "I do not wish to fight," she said softly, "but I cannot return with you." The scout's eyes narrowed, its expression unreadable. "You cannot outrun your destiny, Kayla. You were born to serve us. You were chosen." "Chosen for what?" Jack cut in, feeling the need to ask the question that had been swirling in his mind for the past few hours. "What is it you want with her? You said she was meant to help you. Do what exactly?" The scout turned its gaze toward Jack, clearly irritated by his interruption. "You do not need to understand," it said, its voice carrying that same flat metallic tone. "She is one of us. She has the power to aid in the ascension of our people." "Ascension?" Jack repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Sounds like a really bad title for a movie. Is this a cult thing? Because I'm not signing up for any pyramid schemes, all right?" Kayla looked back at Jack, a brief flash of amusement crossing her face before the gravity of the situation returned. "It is not a cult. They are an ancient species, one that thrives on consuming the energy of entire worlds. They travel from planet to planet, absorbing their energy until nothing remains." Jack blinked, his mind struggling to process the weight of her words. "Wait, hold on. You're telling me these guys are intergalactic energy vampires, and you're supposed to be one of them?" Kayla nodded, her voice tinged with regret. "Yes, I was born to be one of them, to help them harvest and consume the life force of other planets." "Well, that sounds like a pretty bad career choice," Jack muttered. "And here, I thought I had a rough job with data entry." The scout shifted uncomfortably, though it didn't show outward signs of irritation. "Your jokes are wasted, human. This is not a laughing matter." "I'm not laughing," Jack said, putting up his hands in mock surrender. "I'm just trying to lighten the mood before someone, gets eliminated." The scout's eyes flickered, a brief spark of frustration crossing its features. "You will not stand in our way. Kayla will return with us, whether she accepts her role or not." Kyla's face hardened, and her eyes glowed with a soft but unmistakable energy. "I will not." "Good girl," Jack whispered under his breath, though he wasn't sure whether Kayla could hear him. He wasn't sure if she could even appreciate the support, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't about to let this alien walk all over her, especially not when she had so much more heart than any overgrown space bug in a shiny jumpsuit. The scout let out a long, exasperated breath, its metallic voice sounding even more unsettling. "You do not understand what you are dealing with. You cannot stop what is coming. Your planet will be consumed as all others have been. We will ascend. You will be eliminated." The word stung, but Jack wasn't about to let it show. "Yeah, okay, but let me ask you something. How does all this consumption work? You just show up, zap everything on Earth into oblivion, and then go back home to your, what? Your space penthouse with your intergalactic elite friends." The scout didn't answer right away. Instead, it took a step forward, the sound of its boots making a soft but unnerving echo against the wooden floorboards. "We are not here to negotiate," it said slowly. "We are here to take what is ours." "Yeah, well, that's the thing," Jack replied, feeling a surge of determination building up inside him. "I don't think it's yours. And if I'm being honest, I'm pretty sure you're really bad at customer service." Kayla's eyes flickered between Jack and the scout. The tension was palpable, and Jack knew it was only a matter of time before one of them made a move. Kayla didn't want to fight, but she wasn't backing down either. Jack had the nagging feeling that whatever happened next, it wouldn't just change the course of their day. It might change the course of everything. The scout's patience seemed to be wearing thin. "You have no idea what we are capable of," it said, almost as if it were trying to educate Jack. "We are the last of our kind. We have traveled for millennia, absorbing the life force of countless planets, until there is nothing left but dust." "And that's your idea of a good time?" Jack asked, incredulous. "You're starving the universe?" The scout's eyes flickered. "We do not starve. We evolve. And we have chosen Kayla to help us achieve our final ascension. She is essential. Without her, we cannot reach our goal." Jack rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "All right, so you're telling me you guys want to eat up the entire world, but you need Kayla to help you do it?" How does that even work? I mean, we're talking about a whole planet here. Kayla's power is unique, the scout explained, as though explaining a simple fact of life. She has the ability to manipulate energy on a scale beyond your comprehension. She can channel it, focus it, amplify it. With her assistance, we can extract the energy we need from this planet. So, in short, Jack said, you want to turn Kayla into some kind of giant cosmic battery for your evil energy-absorbing scheme. The scout paused, considering his words. Yes, that is one way of putting it. Jack turned to Kayla, his mind racing. And you're not okay with that? Kayla's eyes were filled with a deep sorrow, but her voice was firm. I cannot be a part of it. I have seen the destruction they leave behind. I will not be their tool. There it was, the heart of the matter. Kayla wasn't just a runaway. She was an escapee from a terrible fate, a fate she could have easily accepted given her power. But instead, she chose humanity. She chose to fight. Jack felt a swelling pride in his chest. This was why he couldn't back down. Not for his planet, not for his world, but for her. So, Jack said, stepping forward, it seems like we've reached an impasse. Kayla turned to him, her eyes softening, but still filled with resolve. Yes, but I will not return with them. The scout's patience had worn thin. It took another step toward them, its body emanating a strange, unsettling hum. Then you leave me no choice. But Jack wasn't done. He wasn't about to let this alien walk all over them. Not now, not ever. Right, Jack said, adjusting his posture and looking the scout in the eye. So, let's figure this out. But I'd really prefer if we could do it over coffee instead of a world-ending showdown, all right? Kayla blinked, then shook her head with the smallest of smiles. Maybe we can work something out, Jack said with a grin. But first, I'm going to need a really strong cup of coffee. Jack stood in his kitchen, one hand firmly clutching a mug of coffee so strong it could probably power a small city. The dark brew was the only thing keeping his brain from melting under the weight of the bizarre situation. The scout, standing at the edge of the kitchen with its unblinking, otherworldly eyes, seemed to be just as out of place as Jack felt. Kayla, meanwhile, was calm, her stance relaxed but alert, the faintest flickers of energy dancing around her fingers. So, Jack said, taking a slow sip of coffee to buy himself time, I've got to admit I never imagined my morning would involve an alien standoff over planetary destruction. Usually, it's just me and my half-empty cereal box. Kayla shot him a look that was half exasperated, half amused. This is no time for jokes, Jack. Oh, I beg to differ. Jack flashed her a grin. Humor is the only thing keeping me from losing it completely. Besides, if I don't laugh at the absurdity of all this, I might just start crying, and no one wants that. The scout, who had been eerily silent up until this point, took a step forward, its strange mechanical hum resonating throughout the room. You underestimate the gravity of this situation, human. You will either stand with us, or you will be eliminated. Your planet's fate has already been sealed. Yeah, I got that the first time you said it, Jack replied, leaning against the counter and taking another sip of coffee. But here's the thing. I'm not really into eliminating people, or planets, or frankly, anything but the day's to-do list. You guys do you, but I'm not going to be your personal cheerleader. Kayla stepped forward then, her eyes glowing faintly with a soft blue light, like distant stars in the night sky. He's right, you know. This isn't something that can just be forced. You want me to come with you, to help you ascend. But that's not how this works. The scout shifted, clearly agitated, but still maintaining its calculated demeanor. You are part of us, Kayla. You belong with us. I belong with myself, Kayla said firmly. I will not be used again. The scout's eyes flickered with what Jack could only describe as frustration. You are not in control. Your fate was decided long before you left. Yeah, well, maybe fate can go pound sand, Jack muttered under his breath, not entirely convinced that was a phrase that made any sense in this context, but still feeling oddly satisfied by his defiance. Kayla raised a hand, and the scout fell silent, its eyes narrowing in a way that suggested it wasn't thrilled about Kayla taking the lead in this conversation. "Listen," she said, turning to the scout. "You can keep calling this my fate, but I made a choice. I walked away from this life, and I'm not going back." There was a long silence, the kind that settled deep into your bones, making every breath feel too loud. Jack shifted uncomfortably, not knowing what to do or say. He had a sudden, overwhelming urge to open the fridge and grab something to snack on, maybe some old cheese or a stale granola bar, anything to avoid feeling like the world was about to end in his kitchen. The scout seemed to consider Kayla's words, and Jack took that as a small victory. "You think you can stop us?" it asked, its voice lowering, taking on a darker tone. "Do you think you can hold back the inevitability of what we are? We will consume this world and move on. There is no stopping us. Not even you." Kayla's energy flared briefly, but it was not in anger, more like the faintest spark of frustration. "It's not about stopping you. It's about choosing who we are. You think we're slaves to some cosmic will, but we're not. I'm not." Jack set the mug down on the counter with a clink, feeling the weight of the moment. It wasn't just Kayla standing up to this scout. It was both of them. Two people from entirely different worlds, standing together against something far larger than either of them. It was raw, it was real, and it was giving Jack a sense of purpose he hadn't known he needed. "You're asking for something I don't think you can have," Jack said, feeling a strange, bubbling confidence rising in him. "You're asking Kayla to sacrifice herself for your ascension, but she's already made her decision. She's not your tool anymore. And frankly, if you think you're going to drag her back without a fight, you've got another thing coming." The scout didn't respond at first. Its form seemed to shimmer slightly, as if the very air around it was bending under the pressure of its presence. The room felt colder somehow, as if the temperature had dropped by a few degrees. Then it spoke again, its voice flat and emotionless, but with an edge to it. "You do not understand what you're dealing with. We are not just conquerors. We are the last of our kind. We seek survival, not conquest. Without Kayla, we cannot survive." Kayla took a slow, deliberate step forward, her energy wrapping around her like a visible aura. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "but I won't be the one who helps you destroy everything I've come to care about. I've seen your kind's work, and I will not be a part of it." Jack opened his mouth to add something witty, but he stopped himself. This wasn't a time for jokes anymore. It was clear now that the stakes were higher than ever. The scout stared at Kayla for a long, tense moment. The silence stretched between them, and Jack couldn't help but wonder if the alien was reconsidering its position. Maybe there was more to this alien's desperation than it was letting on. But that thought was fleeting, and soon the scout straightened its posture, its gaze shifting to Jack. "You do not know what you're up against," the scout said again, but this time it seemed almost tired. "You cannot stop what is coming." Kayla's energy flared once more, but this time it was accompanied by a surprising calm. She wasn't angry, she was resolute. "I don't need to stop it, I just need to make sure that I don't help you." Jack smiled, turning to face the scout once more. "And if you're not going to let us live our lives in peace, well, I guess we'll just have to make you." The scout stood frozen for a moment, its shimmering presence all the more imposing in the quiet aftermath of their words. Finally, it took a step back, its movements slower than before. "We will not give up," it said, its voice softer now, more contemplative. "And we'll be here," Kayla said, her voice unwavering, "ready to make sure you don't get what you want." There was a pause, just long enough for Jack to feel the tension in the air loosen, if only by a fraction. The scout seemed to consider Kayla's words, its eyes flickering with something Jack couldn't quite read. Then, without another word, it turned and began to retreat. Jack watched it leave, still uncertain if they had won, if they'd just bought themselves a little more time, or if this was the calm before the storm. As the scout's figure disappeared into the distance, Jack finally let out the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Whew, that was too close, he muttered. He looked over at Kayla, who was watching him with a strange expression. "You're not going to stop with the jokes, are you?" she asked, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. Jack grinned, leaning against the counter. "You know it, but I'll try to keep the world-ending jokes to a minimum, okay?" Kayla's smile widened just a little. "We're not out of danger yet." "Yeah, I know," Jack said, his voice more serious now. "But for now, we've got time. Let's use it wisely." And for the first time in what felt like forever, Jack felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely out of his depth. Jack stood on the front porch, his fingers wrapped around the railing as he gazed out over the small, quiet street. The sun had set hours ago, leaving the world bathed in an eerie purple twilight. The peaceful night seemed too calm after everything that had transpired, like the calm after a storm that had yet to fully pass. Kayla stood beside him, her gaze not on the horizon, but on the small house that had, over the past few weeks, become a strange sort of refuge for both of them. It wasn't much, just a modest 2-story house with peeling paint and a garden that needed far more care than Jack had ever given it. But it had been their battleground, their place of safety, their sanctuary, the place where they fought for the future. "Do you ever wonder," Jack asked, breaking the silence, "how we got here? I mean, not just here, but here in the universe, standing on the edge of what could be the end of everything, and all we've got is this." He motioned vaguely at the house, as though it could explain everything. Kayla glanced at him, her eyes soft, but with that same fierce resolve that had carried her through every trial. "I wonder every day." Her voice was quiet, contemplative. "But sometimes, Jack, it's not about how we got here. It's about what we choose to do with the time we have." Jack snorted, a wry smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Sounds like something out of a motivational poster. "Choose to be your best self, even if aliens are trying to eat your planet." "You know what I mean," Kayla said, rolling her eyes. "It's easy to get lost in the what-ifs, the buts, but none of that changes the fact that this moment right now is all we have. It's all we can control." Jack took a deep breath, nodding. He had come to understand that more than ever. Ever since that first bizarre encounter with Kayla, he had been thrust into a world that made no sense, where aliens were real, where an ancient race was bent on consuming everything, and where his life had turned into a bizarre blend of action and absurdity. He had tried to fight back with humor, and it had worked, for the most part. But now, with Kayla at his side, he finally understood the stakes. The scout had retreated after their tense confrontation, but Jack knew it wouldn't be the last time they'd face it. The threat hadn't gone away. It had merely been delayed. Kayla had made her decision to defy her origins, to fight for her own destiny, but the cost of that defiance was still unclear. The choice to protect humanity had become a battle not only for Earth, but for Kayla's very soul. "We've bought ourselves time," Jack said quietly. "But for how long?" "I don't know," Kayla answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I've made my choice. I've chosen my path, and I don't intend to go back." Jack turned to look at her, his expression somber but resolute. "Neither do I." In the weeks since the scouts' retreat, things had quieted down. Kayla had explained more about her past, about the alien race that had created her, about her ability to manipulate energy, and about the struggle she had always faced. She had been made to serve, to become a tool for the consumption of worlds, but her heart had always rebelled against that fate. Her rebellion had led her to Earth, and to Jack. They had worked together, preparing for what might come next. Jack had learned more about Kayla's powers than he ever expected to, though they were still a mystery in many ways. She could manipulate energy, but not in the way the scouts had intended. It wasn't about destruction, it was about creation. She could heal, protect, and even redirect energy, but she had no idea how to harness her full potential without risking the destruction of everything around her. "I've been thinking," Kayla said, breaking Jack from his thoughts. About what comes next. About where I go from here. Jack raised an eyebrow. Are you saying you're thinking of leaving? Kayla shook her head, a faint smile appearing on her lips. Not leaving. But I can't stay here forever. You've already helped me, Jack, more than anyone else ever could. But I can't keep hiding. If the scouts come back, they'll find me. And if they do, I'll have to face them. Jack felt a pang of worry twist in his stomach. The thought of Kayla leaving, of losing her, was something he couldn't fathom. She had become more than just an alien girl hiding in his shed. She had become someone he could trust, someone he could count on. He couldn't imagine facing the universe without her by his side. I'm not ready to say goodbye, he admitted, his voice low. But I understand. You've got your own destiny to fight for, too. I just wish I could make it easier for you. Kayla turned to him then, her expression more serious than he had ever seen it. You've already made it easier for me, Jack. You showed me what it's like to live as more than just a tool, as more than just a weapon. You gave me something I didn't even know I needed, a reason to fight for myself. Jack smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. You know, I never planned on being someone's hero. But I guess if I had to choose a side, it'd be yours. There was a long silence between them as they both looked at the stars above. For a moment, the weight of their journey hung heavy in the air. The danger had not passed, and they both knew it. But something had changed. In their shared defiance, in the trust they had built, they had found something stronger than fear. They had found each other. The faint hum of energy filled the air, and Jack turned to see Kayla's fingers glowing softly, a pulse of light that matched the stars above. She was ready. Are you sure about this? Jack asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Kayla nodded, her resolve unshakable. I'm sure. I have to face what's coming, but I won't do it alone, not anymore. Then I'm with you, Jack said, his words carrying the weight of a promise. We're in this together. And just like that, the weight of everything that had come before them seemed to shift, to lighten, as if they had finally found their place in the chaos of the universe. As they stood together, looking out at the horizon, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The world was still in danger, still vulnerable to the alien threat, but for the first time, he believed they had a fighting chance. They had a purpose. They had each other. And no matter what came next, they would face it side by side. With that final thought, Jack took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill his lungs. Whatever the future held, he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning.